Chapter 22. A Thief to Catch a Thief. It was not a matter of much difficulty for Trent, still Mr. Maltby, to become acquainted with male members of the set in San Francisco which Miss Thompson affected. He knew that she dined each night at a cafe which attracted many motion picture people. And he learned that there was a producer from Los Angeles now looking for easy money in San Francisco, who was very friendly with her. Since this man Wheeler was easy of approach to such as seemed prosperous, it was not difficult for Trent to strike up an acquaintance one day at the St. Charles. Wheeler, first of all, as became a loyal native son, spoke of climate. Then, with even greater enthusiasm, he spoke of the movies as money-makers. He wanted to get a little money together, put on a feature and sell it. He arranged all the details on the back of a St. Charles menu card. He had an idea which, if William Reynard of New York could learn of it, would bring that eminent producer of features a cool $1,000,000. Anthony Trent hung back with the lack of interest a man with money to invest may properly exhibit. Wheeler was sure he had money. He lived at a first-class hotel, he dined well, and he was a dresser to be admired. Also, Wheeler had seen a sizable roll of bills on occasion. There came a night when, at Anthony Trent's expense, Miss Nora Thompson, Wheeler, and a svelte girl called by Wheeler California's leading ingenue, partook of a sumptuous repast. Had it not been that Trent was out for business, the whole thing would have disgusted him. Wheeler and Nora were blatantly vulgar and intent on impressing their host. The ingenue said 100 times that he was like one of her dearest gentleman friends now being featured by the Joubert Film Company. Her friend was handsome, but she liked Anthony's nose better. With coffee came the great scheme. Wheeler wanted to make a 5-reel feature of the Andrew Apthorpe murder. Nora Thompson was to play the lead. "It'll knock 'em dead," cried Wheeler. "Gee, what press agent stuff!" He helped himself, with a hand trembling from excitement, to another gulp of wine. "My boy, you're in luck. We'll go into this thing on equal shares. I'm putting up $50,000 and you shall put up a like sum. We'll clear up 500%. "You've put up 50,000 in actual cash?" Trent demanded. "That's what I capitalize my knowledge of pictures at," Wheeler explained. "George is one of the best-known producers in the game," Miss Thompson said, a trifle nettled at what she thought was a smile of contempt on the other's face. "He don't need your money. I've got enough in this bag right here to produce it." She waved a black moire bag before Trent's eyes. George Wheeler looked at her and frowned. What a foolish project, he thought, to spend one's own money when here was a victim. "You keep that, little one," he said generously. "We're gentlemen. We don't want to take a lady's money. We'll talk it over later." A keen salesman, he noted Trent was growing restive. If the matter were persisted in, he might either take a fright or take offence. All this he explained later. "You see, Nora," he remarked, "that guy has a chin on him that means you can't drive him." "He's got a cold, nasty eye," said Nora, who was not without her just fears of strangers. "I'm going to play the game so he'll beg me to let him in on it," Wheeler boasted. "I know the way to play that sort of bird." The negotiations resulted in Trent's seeing a great deal more of this precious couple than he cared for. The ingenue, finding her charms made no impression on him, was rarely included in the little dinners and excursions. It was when Trent had met Miss Thompson a dozen times that he consulted the notes he had made on each occasion. It was a method of working unique so far as he could learn. It might yield no results in 1,000 cases. In the 1,001st it might be the clue. It was nothing more than a list of the costumes he had seen the ex-nurse wear. On going through the list he saw that, whereas Miss Thompson had worn a new dress on each occasion of the dinners in public restaurants, with shoes and hosiery to harmonize or match the color scheme of her gown, she had always carried the black moire bag. and since it was a fashion of the moment for women to own many and elaborate bags of this sort to match or harmonize with the colour scheme or details of their costumes, it seemed odd that Norah Thompson, who had been buying everything that seemed modish, should fail to follow the way of the well-dressed. The bag, as he remembered it, was about 7 inches wide and perhaps 10 inches long. It was closed by a silver buckle and a pendant of some sort swung at each corner. Concentrating upon it, he remembered they were not beads, but made of the same material as the bag itself, and in size about that of an English walnut. He called to mind the fact that he had never seen her without this bag. Why should she cling so closely to what was already démodé? Were he a genuine detective, the problem had been an easy one. He could seize the bag, search it and denounce her. But that would entail giving up a priceless stone for a few $1,000s of reward. On the pretext of having to buy a present for a Chicago cousin, Anthony Trent led the willing Wheeler into one of the city's exclusive department stores. Wheeler was anxious to do anything and everything for his new friend. That night he, Norah and some other friends were to be Trent's guests at a very recherché dinner. He felt, as the born salesman senses these things, that he would get his answer that night and that it would be favourable. And with $50,000 to play with, he might do anything. Probably the last project would be to make a picture himself. Trent asked to be shown the very latest thing in bags. The counter was presently laden with what the salesgirl claimed to be direct importations from Paris. Trent selected one which he said would suit his cousin. "You ought to get one for Norah," he said. "What colour is she going to wear tonight?" "Light blue," Wheeler returned almost sulkily. He had been with her when she purchased the gown, and resented the extravagance. If she went on at that rate, there would be nothing left for him. "What they call gentian blue." The salesgirl picked out an exquisite blue bag on which the lilies of France had been painted daintily by hand. It was further decorated with a border of fleur-de-lis in seed pearls. "This is the biggest bargain we have," the girl assured them. "The government won't allow any more to be brought over. It's marked down to $100. She looked at George Wheeler. "Will you take it?" "I'm not sure it's the shade my friend wants," he prevaricated. In reality he cursed Trent for dragging him into a proposition which could cost such a sum. He had not a tenth of the amount upon him. "I'll take it," Trent said carelessly, pushing $100 bill over the counter. "I've plenty of cousins, and girls always like these things." Wheeler sighed enviously. He often remarked if he could capitalize his brains he would pay an income tax of $1 million. But that did not prevent him from being invariably short of ready money. He was looking forward to the dinner Trent was to give him and his friends that night. Besides Norah, there were 5 other moving picture people who were to be used to impress Trent with their knowledge of the game and the money he could make out of it. They would be amply repaid by the dinner, for there are those who serve the screen drama whose salaries are small. These ancillary salesmen and women were to meet at 6:30 in the furnished flat Norah Thompson had rented. There they were to be drilled. It was while they were receiving the finishing touches that Anthony Trent knocked upon the door, blandly announcing that he had brought an automobile to take Norah and George to the hotel where he was staying. Instantly the gathering registered impatience to start. Wheeler, always suspicious, feared that Trent might think it curious that so many were engaged in earnest conversation, and he wondered if their voices had carried to the hall where Trent had waited. Suave and courteous, Trent made himself at home among the crowd of people who were, so they informed him, world famous in a screen sense. Trent, as usual, had timed things accurately. It was part of his scheme that Norah should want to banish from his mind the idea that there had been any collusion. She was bright and vivacious in her manner toward him. "You're a sweet man," she exclaimed. "I'm dreadfully hungry and thirsty. Come on, boys and girls." He noticed that Although arrayed in a new costume of blue, she clung to her black moiré bag. He called Wheeler aside while Nora mixed a last cocktail for the men. "George," he whispered, "that blue bag I bought is just the thing to give Nora." George felt a parcel thrust into his hand. "It's a little present from me to you, and she mustn't know I bought it." "She shan't from me," Wheeler said, almost tremulously. Nothing could have happened more delightfully. Not 10 minutes ago, in the presence of his even less prosperous motion picture colleagues, Nora had called him a tightwad who didn't think enough of the woman he was to marry to buy her a ring. He explained that easily enough by saying nothing in San Francisco was good enough for her, and that he was ordering one from New York. This present from a rich and careless spender would prove affluence no less than affection. "Thanks, old man, a million times." Nora was at the door when he presented it. She was genuinely affected by the gift. Perhaps her thanks were even warmer when one of her friends picked up the sales slip which had fluttered to the ground and read aloud the price. "I'm tired of that black bag," George complained. "Nora's never going to carry that when she's got this," one of the other women cried. "It matches her gown exactly." "I took care of that," George said complacently. "I told the saleswoman to get me the best she had, but it must be gentian blue." There seemed a momentary hesitation before the black bag was discarded. To cling to it at such a moment would be to court suspicion. This was Trent's strategy. Her manner was not lost upon one of the others, a character woman named Richards. "Why, George," she laughed, "I believe a former lover gave Nora that bag, and she hates to part with it. I was in a picture once where the heroine carried the ashes of her first sweetheart around with her. I'd look into it if I was you." Nonchalantly Nora emptied the contents of the black bag into the new one. Then she pitched the old one onto a chair. "Now for the eats," she said cheerily. End of chapter 22.